Welcome to Sanatan Divyata, Eternal Divinity, and I am Padam Gupta. In a series, Swami Vivekanand, his life and legacy, we continue. Naren at the Master's sickbed. It was in the middle of 1885 that Sri Ramakrishna showed sign of cancer in the throat and was removed for treatment, first to Shambhupur and then to a garden house at Kosipur. The intimate devotees of the Master now took upon themselves the duty of attending to the medical treatment of their Master. The householder devotees paid the expenses while the young disciple, who later on became sannyasins, undertook the duty of nursing the Master staying at Kashipur. Narendra was the leader. Most of these young men were studying in colleges, and the guardians were sore at the heart to see them neglect their studies and stay away from the education institutions. So Narendra has to persuade them to stay on at Kashipur by making them understand that the duty to the great Master was more important than anything else, and that association with such a great and illuminated soul they would never get afterward. So attracted by the love for the Master and guided by the Narendra leadership, this small band of 15 young men became the nucleus of the later monastic order of the Ramakrishna. Till now, these young men were only occasional visitors to Dakshineshwar and casual acquaintance of one another. The Master illness was thus the occasion for them to become a strongly knit community, serving him and practicing spiritual discipline under his direction. All of them had great spiritual realizations during this period, but Narendra's progress was the most remarkable. With the removal of the three inhibitions that stood in the way of the development, namely the non-acceptance of the Guru ideal, the contempt for the truth of non-duality, and his disregard for the Universal Mother, his inherent spiritual aspiration burst forth into a mighty flame. He spent night wrapped in meditation so deep that even if a thick blanket of mosquitoes covered his body, he could not be roused from his absorption in the Spirit. It was one of those days that the Master asked him what his ideal in his life was. He replied that it was to remain absorbed in Samadhi at all time, with only short intervals of relative consciousness to take some food for the maintenance of the body. The Master then told him that Samadhi was too small an ideal for him. He was to be like a wild spread tree that gave protection to countless numbers of weary travelers, meaning that he had come to the world not for any end of his own, but for the service of humanity. Nonetheless, the Master was gracious enough to bless him with Nirvikalpa Samadhi, which is considered the highest non-dualistic experience in which the I consciousness become merged in and identify with the universal consciousness. It is the state of consciousness which the Master wanted to confirm of Narendra at his very first meeting with him, but it was found that he was not yet prepared for it then. Afterwards, then his mind was more mature. Narendra had prayed many a time to the Master for the experience. At one evening, while he was meditating in a room in Kashipur garden house, he felt a brilliant light at the back of his head. It became bigger and finally seemed to burst. His mind was merged in it without the least trace of actional and body consciousness. Gopal Senior, who was also meditating in that room, heard Naren crying out, "Oh Gopalda, where is my body?" His body was lying rigid and ice cold as in death. Afraid that he was dying, Gopal Senior reported the matter to the Master, who was sitting in a state of intense calmness with a serious look in his countenance. On hearing what had happened, the Master, who has intuitively understood the whole position, said, Let him stay in that state for a while. He has been teasing me long enough for it. At about 9 p.m. he began to become conscious little by little. When he became fully conscious of his body and external world, his heart was overflowing with bliss. Then he presented himself before the Master, who looked at him intensely and said, "Now then, the mother has shown you everything. Just as a treasure is locked up in a box, so will this realization you have had just now be locked up. And the key shall remain with me. You have work to do. When you have finished mother's work, the treasure box will be unlocked again, and you will know everything then as you did just now." The Master ascensions and formation of the monastic brotherhood. During few days more that the Master lived, he did several things for the continuance of the work of spiritual administrations that he has started. He gave orchid clothes to the young men attended on him and asked them to take holy bhiksha, thus symbolizing their continuation into monastic community. He further entrusted them to Narendra's care, commanding him to instruct these young men and lead them. Narendra hesitated to do this. The Master one day called Narendra to his side. He looked steadfastly at him and entered into samadhi. Naren now felt that a subtle force was entering in him and he lost external consciousness. When he came to himself, the Master said to him feelingly, "O Naren, today I have given you my all and have become a fakir, a penniless beggar. By the force of the power transmitted by me, great things will be done by you. Only after that you will go where you come from." Further, the Master used to sit him by his side and speak to him privacy for a considerable length of time, most probably instructing him on spiritual matters and on how to keep together and guide the small brotherhood that was formed by his sick bed. Towards the end, a day or two before the Master's passing, a curious idea enters Naren's mind. The Master has several times told him that he was an incarnation of the divine. Naren now thought within himself that he would be conceived of it only if the Master were to declare this is his present state of utter physical prostration. No sooner this did idea pass through Naren's mind than the Master, who could hardly speak, drew up all his energy and spoke in a clear voice. "O Naren, are you not yet convinced? He who was Rama, he who was Krishna, he himself is now Ram Krishna in this body, but not in your Vedantic sense. It means that what is averred is not what is conveyed by the Vedic teaching, that the Jiva is Brahman himself, but that the power which creates, preserves and dissolves the universe is also the redeeming power which appears from time to time in human form for the salvation of a man, and that he, Ramakrishna, is identical with that power." Sri Ramakrishna passed away on 16th August 1886. Within few days, the Kashipur establishment was disbanded. Narendra, even in those early days, wanted to acquire a piece of land on the bank of the Ganges to install the secret relics of the Master. To his great disappointment, he could not succeed in it then. It had to await his return from a successful mission in the West, when he was to establish a temple for the Master relics with the monastery attached to it at Belur. Gradually, all the young monastics, with Naren as the director, gathers together with an old dilapidated building at Barangagor at the Mat for the resident. It was only by Narendra's persistent exhaustion that many of these young men got over the pull of their kith and kin and came to stay in the monastery. Life in the monastery was unbelievably austere. Food and clothing were very scanty, but the power of the aspiration and the burning spirit of renunciation compensated for it. There was nothing like social and humanitarian work for service to engage the monastic order in its early days. The time of the monastic brothers was therefore completely taken up by meditation, devotional practices, bhajan and the study of the scripture. See, Ramakrishna has already given them austere clothes and made them sannyasi. But to confirm the entry into sannyasam or the with traditional rite, they performed the Brija Homa and adopted new name. Naren is supposed to have adopted the name of Vivekanand then, but in order to avoid being identified by his brother disciple during the days of his wandering as a Parivajaka, he seemed to have called himself sometime Vidishananda and sometime Satchidananda. It was on the eve of his departure to the west that he assumed the name of Vivekananda permanently. After some months of a community life at the Mutt, the young man felt the traditional urge of the Indian monks to lead a wandering life, visiting the holy place and performing austerities in solitary spot. So one after another they left the Mutt for shorter or longer periods as Paribrajakas, wanderers, but the continuity of the Mutt and service of the Master was kept up by Sashi, Swami Ramakrishnananda, who never left the Master relics enshrined at the Barangamore Mutt. Narendra, Swami Vivekanand, as we shall call him hereafter, also felt this urge and left Calcutta in 1888 as a wandering monk. For some time he travelled in the company of one or two another of his fellow disciples and occasionally returned to the Mutt. But from 1890 he never came to Mutt till his return in 1897 after a successful mission in the West. For a few months of this period he travelled with Swami Akhandanand to Himalaya Pilgrimage Center and then left him at Meerut and travelled alone, avoiding contact with his fellow disciples as far as possible. His idea seemed to have been to avoid all ties of personal affection. This phase of his life continued till the beginning of 1893 when he returned to Madras from Kanyakumari and Rameshwaram, completing his pilgrimage from the Himalayas to the southmost end of India. We'll continue life as a wandering ascetic in next episode.